Dobry wieczór, jestem Teena i jestem bardzo sławną kobietą. Ciao, mi chiamo Teena e sono una donna molto famosa. Здравствуйте, меня зовут Teena и я очень известная женщина. Hola, yo soy Latina, soy una donna molto famosa. Привет, меня зовут Teena и я дуже відома жінка. Bonjour, je m'appelle Teena et je suis une femme très célèbre. Ja jestem Teena i ja jestem zelo znana ženska. Hola, me llamo Teena, yo soy una mujer muy famosa. Sin uñas, sin esta mano. Hi everyone and welcome back to an episode of Teena Talks. Now, it's Tuesday and I was thinking, okay, I need to go and do an episode today. Just did a very quick face, just because I had to go and drop my kids off at their daddy's funeral. You know, hilarious, right? And I thought, what could I talk about today? And I want to talk about something which is really, really important to me, and that is languages. Now, I'm not just a very, very famous woman and drag performer, and you shouldn't maybe go and follow me and subscribe because I do content like this every single Tuesday, but I'm also a linguist. I have learnt many, many languages throughout my life, and it's very important as well, the way I perform, the way I do my comedy, the way I do my character of Teena. And today I want to go and talk through the languages that I speak and why do I speak them, but also give you some advice about language learning and how you can learn lots of languages. Now, we're going to start with the first language, which is English. Yes, I speaks the English. Should I go to number two? Yep. But the first proper language, so number two, the second language we're going to talk about today is Spanish. Ta-da! So my story speaking Spanish, I have to go back to when I was 5 years old. Do you like my nails? Very Loreen Eurovision. Don't speak Swedish. So when I was 5 years old, my parents broke up and my dad moved to Spain and another country, won't say what it is yet, and it just became a way for me to go and connect with him. So when I would go there on holiday, I would make friends with the Spanish kids, I would buy magazines, I bought a Spanish dictionary, I learned it by myself, I listened to Spanish music, and it just became a really, really big obsession for me as a child to learn Spanish and to learn instruments. My dad's a musician. Go figure. And all through my life, I just went on to study Spanish and listen to pretty much exclusively Spanish music and read Spanish books and enjoy Spanish films. When I was 13, I could then do Spanish at school. I then did GCSE, went to college and did Spanish A-level. Then I went to university and read Spanish. And all through my life, I love Spanish language. I am a Spanophile. Hispanophile, you know what I mean. Don't replace that and put that on the internet. I just love Spanish language. So yes, hablo español. There we go. The third language I'm going to talk about today is a language which is very, very similar to Spanish, which is Catalan. Yo parlo català. So my dad didn't just move to Spain, he also moved to Andorra. So although I concentrated on Spanish, which is really, really bad for me to admit that out loud, I did start to hear Catalan from a very young age. When I was at college, when I was 17, my A-level Spanish conversational teacher, Mrs. Hebron, RIP, I loved you so much, she was from Barcelona and she helped me learn Catalan when I should have been studying for my Spanish A-level. You know, I fell in love with Catalan as much as I love Spanish. And it was, again, pretty much the same entry route. It was me listening to Catalan music, reading Catalan literature. I can look over at my bookshelf, all these Catalan books I've just kept for years. And when I was 20, I went to live in Spain for 6 months, as you do when you do Spanish at university, and I went to Barcelona. And it was then I really got into Catalan more than ever, because Barcelona, I was working for the British Chamber of Commerce, true fact, you end up speaking a lot of Catalan, especially when you're working in business. And again, I loved Catalan, I loved speaking in Catalan a lot more than Spanish at the time. I became an independentista. I will tell a quick funny story though. So if you learn Spanish and you say to a Spanish person, hablo español una caña por favor, I speak Spanish, give me a beer, yeah, they will go, wow, that's really good. If you go and say something similar in Catalan, per ejemplo, hola, yo soc Teena, they will say, soc Latina. They will correct you. They are not as impressed as Spanish people. It is crazy. That's the thing. If you're Catalan, they will correct you. They are not as impressed as Spanish people. It's like a Napoleon complex. For example, if you say to an American person, are you British? They will laugh. If you say to an Irish person, are you British? They will punch you in the face. If you say to a British person, are you American? We will jump out the window. It's that sort of mentality, right? But Catalan people, I love them secretly. I love the culture. And that is why parlo català. Okay, well, we have done English, Spanish, Catalan. My fourth language is Polish. Can't put my finger down. And again, this is connected to my dad. All my languages are pretty much the fault of my dad. So my dad might have lived in Spain and Andorra, still does, but his family are actually Polish. I am British Polish, although yo soc Latina, that is a joke about my name, is a Catalan joke. With a famous drag queen who lived in Madrid, but it's a long story. It was in Barcelona. That's how Teena was born. Anyway, I'll tell you that for another day. My dad is indeed British Polish, and I spoke Polish when I was very, very young. When my parents broke up, I refused to speak Polish. I went pretty much very quickly into Spanish, and I forgot all of my Polish. I still can speak Polish. I can understand a lot of Polish. When I go to my family, everyone speaks in Polish. I'm so used to it. I also used to live in London as well. There's a massive Polish community there. I have tried since to properly learn Polish. It doesn't sort of go in properly. I started doing Polish GCSE as an extracurricular thing, never took the exam. I started learning Polish again during lockdown because I could. So I can sort of get by in Polish, but it's not one of my best languages, which I know is a shame. Ale przepraszam, niedobre mówię po polsku, ale lubię Polskę. Said something in Polish. Let me know below. I can sort of speak Polish. Yes. Polish is a traumatic language. So the fifth language I speak is Russian. And the reason why is because, and I'm going to mix this with the Polish story, so I went to university where I studied Spanish and Polish. I know, what trauma. And they said, a week before I started, actually, we need you to do a foundation level year of Russian language, and then after 1 year of Russian foundation, you can then transfer to Polish. I had no choice, I had to go and do it. And after the first week of me studying Russian, they turned around and said, oh, by the way, we're shutting the Polish department down at the end of the year. So that's why I also speak Ruski Yazyk, здравствуйте. I speak Russian to a university level. I had to do Russian language for 4 years. Now, this is not because obviously I'm a very, very famous woman who would be really, really accepted to be dressed like this in the centre of St. Petersburg. But the reason I just didn't like Russian language, I felt bitter that I had to go and do it. I didn't like it. I had a problem learning the sounds. So for me, having dyspraxia, I put a little link above, it's especially hard. So it's actually quite easy to learn languages when you have dyspraxia. But the difficult thing is for me, it's the idea of connecting the sounds and the words to how something looks in your mind. And that's why, and I'm going to talk at the end about how to learn languages, I'm really good at learning vocab in pretty much any language in the world apart from something in a Cyrillic language. Could be another Cyrillic language coming up. I'll let you know. Stay tuned. Subscribe. I just couldn't get into Russian. I hated it. And I had to go and do it for 4 years. I spent a lot of time in Russia because when you do Russian at university, well, it was the case at Nottingham, we had to spend a lot of time in Russia. So in 2007, I spent a month in St. Petersburg. I also spent a month in Kaliningrad teaching English language. I then spent my year abroad. So I did 6 months in Spain. I did 9 months in total in Russia. And another language I might speak coming up. I'll get there. Okay, the other language is Ukraine. I don't speak Ukrainian. If you saw the video at the start. Look at me, doing really well to keep this going. Stravo, I think that's Serbian. Anyway, I just didn't like Russian, but I loved being there. I really, really miss living in Russia. Studying Russian at university, just like Spanish, you have to spend time in Russia. Now, I had to go and break it up a little bit. So in 2007, I spent a month in St. Petersburg, and I spent a month teaching English in Kaliningrad. Never go. Well, you can't now, unless you're over there, soz. And I also spent a lot of time in Moscow, including a 6-month stint in 2009, where I was a lecturer at Moscow State University. I know, can you believe it? In the Public Relations Department. And I taught a module for 1 semester in modern British culture. Now, we talked about some really, really interesting topics. For example, it was at the time when Jade Goody was dying, so we read a lot of press about Jade Goody dying. I also used a lot of content from a few magazines I brought over, and the favourite one to use was always the Tesco magazine. But the most interesting thing about my time at Moscow State University is that I did a lesson about the television show Peep Show, which I brought over, I like to think, to Russia. And I had all the scripts, and I photocopied a whole episode. I tried to pick an episode which wasn't too controversial, and if you know Peep Show, most of them are. And we read a whole episode in the class. That was the class when the head lecturer decided to attend. The class finished, and then everyone left, the lecturer left, and within 10 minutes I got an email from her. And I used to remember this verbatim, but she was not happy with me. To give a quote, young people who learn English language should be reading the works of Jane Austen, not reading filth that should only be enjoyed for juvenile delinquents. She was absolutely horrified. Now, Margarita was her name. I think she's still alive. We're Facebook friends. I'm going to do a wellness check afterwards. A lovely, lovely lady. I met her in my first stint in Moscow when I had hemorrhoids. What am I telling you this? I went to the pharmacy. I didn't know a word for hemorrhoids. It was before like smartphones, all right? And this lovely woman came up to me and went, I was like pointing at my bottom, and she was like, hello, can I help you? The most perfect English accent. She's the one who got me the job, the head lecturer. She used to carry around a bag for life from farm foods. What a classy lady. Because you have to remember as well, back in 2008, back in the 2000s, the Latin language was seen to be very, very cool in Russia. And there was a polar bear on the front, but she probably must have known it was the worst supermarket possible. But when I started my career as Teena, I used to carry around a farm foods bag in dedication to Margarita. I'll put a picture there. But I went around the long way. I still speak Russian language a lot. It's such a shame what is happening. I really, really miss living in Russia. I might not miss the language, I really miss living in Russia. I've got some crazy stories about my time. Obviously before the time I looked as beautiful as this, but I do miss the chaos of Russia. It sort of eats at your soul. But yes, я говорю по-русски. Здравствуйте, спасибо большое. Мир. That's peace. I can't make the sign. Okay, now the next language I'm going to talk is Ukrainian. Now, I did a little thing about Ukraine last week. I don't speak Ukrainian, but I can say vychodite, which means are you getting off the metro? Interesting fact, so I also spent, after I taught at Moscow State University, I also spent 3 months living in Kiev. After uni, I also ended up working for a Ukrainian company. This is a controversial thing, and I'm going to say it. Back in 2009, when I lived in Kiev, I never heard Ukrainian language apart from vychodite. People didn't speak it. Wherever I was, there was no Ukrainian language. Everyone spoke Russian. And we know times have changed, and obviously this horrendous war, which should not be bloody happening, is going on. And people in Ukraine are now, even if they speak Russian as their native language, they're all giving it up. And the way to compare it for my UK audience, imagine if Scotland became independent, all right? And most people, they speak English, they wouldn't say they speak Scots, which is a very similar language to English. If we were to go to war, England versus Scotland, people would not speak English. They would never say no, they would say nay, for example. And that's pretty much the same between Ukrainian and Russian. Ukrainian is a bit further away than Russian to Scots, but that's sort of the mentality. People didn't speak Ukrainian at the time, at least to me. I survived in Ukraine speaking Russian. And when the war started, I did a lot, I was doing comedy at the time, I did a lot of benefits. I did a lot of charity work for Ukraine. And one of the things I did was go down to the Ukrainian Centre in Vauxhall in London to see if I could help. And I was turned away because I only spoke Russian. And I understand the bitterness, it is horrendous. But I want everyone out there to know that speaking Russian doesn't make you evil. But it is a really hard language to learn, and I love all my Ukrainians. So there we go. Half Polish, half British. I don't speak Ukrainian. My family surname is actually Ukrainian, but I hablo español, catalan, inglés, polski y ruski jazyk. Okay, we have 4 languages down. The next language I speak is Slovensky. Yes, Slovene language. So in my 4th year, I was allowed to do another language, and the options were Slovene or Serbo-Croat, not Polish. And again, this is in the 2000s, okay? We could say Serbo-Croat then, don't judge. And the options were to do Serbo-Croat, which would be 3 hours a week, and the classes were at 8 in the morning, or it was to do Slovene language for 2 hours a week, and it was in the evening, and you also got to meet the president of Slovenia and go on national Slovene radio every single year. Now, as a very famous woman, of course, I had to go and do Slovene language, and it was so much fun. I love Slovene. The lesson was at like 6 in the evening. Sometimes she'd bring in Slovene wine, and indeed I got to meet the president of Slovenia. My Slovene language is not very good. I should probably do a ranking for this. It's right at the bottom, but ampak govorim po slovensko. I speak Slovene. Oh, another funny story for you as well, while we're here. I remember the first week I was learning Slovene, I got in a cab at Nottingham, and there were some girls, and they said they spoke Slovensko. And I went, govorim po slovensko, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they went, that's 1 to 5 if you didn't get it. And they were like, no, that's incorrect. And I was like really, really shocked. I was like, Slovensko? And they're like, yes, Slovensko. Transpires that Slovensko also means Slovakian in Slovak. Was that an interesting story? Let me know, comment below. Govoriš po slovensko? Let me know as well. Okay, now we've already established I speak 6 languages. There's only 1 language left. Okay, you've come all this way now. This is the really, really non-exciting one. Je parle français! Absolument, of course I speak French. I'm a British person, right? In the UK, you either speak French or German. Everyone at school, we have to do French or German. Well, at least it was the case when I was a child. But I didn't just learn French at school. I went to a bilingual nursery, because if you learn a language very, very young, you will remember it forever. So officially, I started learning French when I was 2 years old. Imagine this, little baby Teena, I was trilingual at the age of 2 years old. I spoke English, French, and Polish. And although like Polish to me, I guess is the trauma language, I've forgotten it. French has always stayed with me. I got all the way through school, I just got top marks in French. I did French GCSE when I was 14 and I got an A star. And I never had a lesson of French after 14, but I can still go to France, I can still speak French, because I started very, very young. So yes, the last language I can speak is French. And sono spiacente, non parlo italiano, però adoro la musica italiana. I love Italian music. Also, when I lived in London, I used to have Italian housemates. I've got lots of Italian friends. I love Italian music. So yeah, I can understand. Well, there we go. The 7 languages I claim I can speak. Now let's go through an order. Let's start at the top. So I speak the English, as we know. Then I would say I speak Spanish, and then Catalan just behind, just because I don't practice my Catalan as much as I used to. After that, we're going to go into Russian. After Russian, we're going to go into my French, and then we're going to say Polish, my trauma language, and then finally my 7th language is Slovene. The second part of the video, just going to finish with this. How do you learn languages? Now, you might not know this, I'm not just a very famous singer, comedian, and just ex-wife, I'm also an English language teacher as well. This is my COVID job I've continued to do as a hobby. I started doing it during COVID. I had my teaching experience before, and I've just kept it going. I have a few students every single day, which works beautifully when you're a late night entertainer like myself. I teach English to a select amount of students. I love English language. I'm obsessed. So if you are an international person, and when I say international person, you're not a native English speaker, why don't you have a class with me? I'll put a link below. Come and see me over at Preply. I love teaching English language, and I want to now give you some tips about how to learn a language. The most important thing about learning a language, in my opinion, is vocabulary. Okay? It's not about confidence. It's not about grammar. It's about vocabulary, because the more words you have in your head, and we need to remember we're going to separate it between nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and verbs, right? Adjectives and adverbs, they come under the same thing. So we're actually looking really at 3 things here. Okay? Often, if you know a verb in English, you can pretty much work out if there's going to be a noun form. If there's going to be a verb form, we can then look at the adjective form, being called a 3rd form adjective. Now, all the words are interconnected. So if you learn one of them, you can find out the others. And, you know, we aren't looking, so for example, if I were to go and say, I helps you, I know what I'm trying to say. We're hearing the word help. If I'm trying to say he is a helpless man, we know that less could be a suffix after help, meaning without. Again, we can then build the words. So the thing is, learn a word, learn the vocabulary, and as long, you know, if I said a unhelp man, I know I'm trying to say a helpless man, depending on the context. Learn the vocabulary, and that's really going to help you build it up. And what I recommend all my students do, and if you want to learn a language, any of the languages I taught today, or if you want to learn English language, I recommend you go and get a notebook, and every single day write in your vocabulary, write in your mistakes, and every single day you're learning a language, write a new page. And then you can then go back, you can then look, you can then repeat it to yourself, you can write it down, you can have flashcards, whatever helps. When you're satisfied with one day's vocab being fully learnt, don't go back. You can check now and then, but tick them off, cross them out, whatever you want to go and do. But my notebook is my biggest advice. And indeed, if you want to learn English with Teena, I don't always look as glamorous as this, but if you're one of my students, you'll recognise where I am at the moment. Come and learn with me. Now come to the end of Teena Talks languages. It's nice to do something a little bit different, talk more about me, not saying I'm a narcissist, but also not to do the whole character as well. You know, I'm being a very, very nice Teena today because talking about languages, talking about childhood trauma, and there is a lot of it, Polish, please, it's not really my jam. It's nice just to be myself and connect with you guys. But yes, I do an episode every single week, Teena Talks every single Tuesday. So if you don't already subscribe, it's like my viewers, right? It's something like 99% do not subscribe. It takes you a second, just subscribe. And we're here every single week. We have a good time. We do some makeup. We do some delusion activities in the street. We talk about how famous I am. We have a really, really good time. So be sure to go and subscribe and like. And I will see you next Tuesday for another episode of Teena Talks. Adios, adeu, adio, paka. That's widzenia. Do widzenia. French. Au revoir.